right, welcome back to Daybreak. Let's get right into our discussion on manufacturing. Of course, it's a sector that the government is hoping will grow the economy and also spur jobs, especially for the youth who are currently unemployed. Let me introduce my guests very quickly as we get into the discussion. We have Phyllis Wakiaga, who is the CEO of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. We also have Samuel Karanja, CEO of the Kenya Importers Association. And last but not least, Reginald Kazutu, who is an economist and financial analyst. Thank you all for joining me this morning. Let me begin with you, Phyllis, just to kind of get a sense and a picture of where we're at in terms of manufacturing. The last couple of years has been very difficult in terms of getting it to where it needs to be, in terms of a contribution to GDP, and also to spur various subsectors within manufacturing. But what's the state of the sector and the industry as we speak?
Thank you, Victoria. The manufacturing sector, I think, as we all know, is a priority sector under Vision 2030, and also one of the sectors identified by the Big Four agenda. The ambition is to see the sector contribute to about 15% contribution of GDP by the 2022. So what is the current play of state is that the sector's contribution to the GDP is about 7.5% to the GDP. The output has been growing over the years, but the challenge is that other sectors are growing significantly faster than the manufacturing sector. The priority sectors in manufacturing would include the textile and apparel sector, the automobile sector, the food and beverage sector, the leather and footwear sector. And those are some of the sectors that have been identified under the Kenya Industrial Transformation Program to spur growth. And I think the reason manufacturing has always been prioritized by countries that have grown economically is because of its impact to spur economic transformation. The sector has a lot of linkages to different parts of the economy, whether it's the services sector like banking, the logistics sector, the agricultural sector. In Kenya, and being an agricultural-rich country, the possibility to grow manufacturing beyond where it is, I think, is very real if there's more value addition within the sector. So the state of play, considering also that we are going through a pandemic, is that the sector is struggling like any other through the pandemic, but also that is showing a lot of resilience and innovation. And I think we've seen that through the pandemic period in Kenya.
Certainly, and we'll be talking about just some of the opportunities. We've seen many manufacturers kind of pivot towards manufacturing PPEs, for instance, to ensure that they're responding to that need for the medical fraternity. But let me bring in Samuel in terms of some of the major concerns for importers right now as we speak, and just what the impact of the pandemic has been.
You know, Victoria, we were not able to import the things that you used to import, in terms of it was a closed economy in many countries of the world. And so we had to live or to survive with the stock that you usually had, that we had, and relied on, you know, the little that the other suppliers could be able to supply. So we were hard hit by the pandemic, and we were now thinking through on how now we are going to move to the next level. And one of the things that I would like to state here is that we have had issues with the government and you know, several stakeholders, and we say that you cannot kill a sector to build a sector. We were, you know, in negotiations with the government that as much as we are proceeding towards manufacturing, we should be able to help small medium entrepreneurs outgrow that level of importation. But you cannot induce pain to be able to, you know, to push the importers into manufacturing. And we see the need of manufacturing, and we are in support of that. But having said that, the manufacturing industry, there are people who are already there, as Phyllis is saying, and they are also, you know, they have advanced very much. But we must be able to take care of the small and micro medium entrepreneurs who are willing to venture and to go into manufacturing. And we have had so many policy hurdles towards that. And so we have been hard hit because we are between a rock and a hard place. We can't be able to import what we were importing with the kind of frequency that we would like to. And the economy is also being affected because many times we underestimate the importations in Kenya, but we are highly reliant on importations. And so many times we are called even by some of the government agencies and telling us, why aren't your members importing these goods? And so the economy is heavily relying on importation as much as they are pushing towards manufacturing.
Certainly, and of course it will be a hard task converting many of the local traders into producers and manufacturers, as you said, and we'll talk about a bit more about what that actually means and what it will look like. Reginald, from your perspective as an economist and a financial analyst, what are some of the growth areas in our economy that you see could present opportunities for those either in manufacturing currently or those seeking to get into the industry?
Vicky, I think what ails the manufacturing sector is something that generally ails that we make policies and which are not based on any data or scientific research, so to speak. You've heard Philly saying that, that the priority areas for the manufacturing sector is apparel and the automobile industry. Then you sit down and you say, we want to build a manufacturing sector where you import close to 70% of the apparel sector. You import most of the components that you use to make an automobile. Then the question then that comes is there a gap that we are creating if we don't have the complete value chain inside the country and you have to rely on imports? Because then if your supplies are cut, especially like during this time of COVID, go down. I believe the opportunity that is there in the manufacturing sector is actually in the value chain process leading to manufacturing of a good. So for example, if you take one of the key areas, which is food production, and you say, or let's use leather, who is rearing the cows? How much skins and hides are we producing? How is the value chain like until we reach to the final guy who is making the shoe, or the final person who's making the leather jacket or the handbag and the leather product? So I think entrepreneurs and as people who want to come into play into this sector is to look at a niche thing leading to the main manufacturing itself. Then that way we'll start seeing growth in this. One thing that we need to take into consideration is that manufacturing is
All right, so we appear to be having a bit of a technical issue reaching Reginald. We'll link back up with him again. But, mentioning that when you're talking about the manufacturing sector in apparel and in the automobile sectors, they're having to import most of what they need to actually assemble or put together many of those products. And Phyllis, Reginald, basically they're questioning the practicality of such a model. How do we lessen, I guess, the dependency on materials coming from outside and try to produce more of that stuff from within?
Thanks, Victoria. I think when I spoke, I didn't only speak about automobile sector. I spoke about agriculture and the importance of having value chains created within the country. As a country, we know that we are very heavy on agriculture. So that's also another priority sector. If you look at the textile and apparel sector, for example, there's an opportunity to have both forward and backward linkages. So the linkages to the farm level, all the way to farm to fashion, I think is really what the ambition is for this sector. When we also talk about other sectors, the big opportunity is not just to sell within the country, but also the African region, the East African region, the COMESA region. And there's a lot of opportunity in that area. And as a country, I think what we should be striving to do is to become a manufacturing hub for Africa and take advantage of the opportunities so that we can create jobs within our economy. There's a big case currently because of COVID for shifting in supply chains. And that's something that we need to ride on as a country so that we create those opportunities. It's not going to happen overnight. I agree with the Importers Association, because even as a local manufacturing sector, We do import a lot of raw materials, intermediate products into the country, and bottlenecks at importation level affect the manufacturing sector significantly and impact on the competitiveness of the sector. So if we can deal with those issues that I think are common for importers to ensure that we're able to import our goods, bring them in competitively, value add in the sectors where we can as much as possible, and also encourage SMEs and support them to participate in value addition locally and manufacturing locally. At CAMP, for example, we have an SME hub that's working with manufacturers who are SMEs to see how we can grow their scale. So this transformation happens over time. There are things that happen to expedite it. COVID, for example, expedited our entire PPE sector in the country. So I think as government and policy makers, it's up to us to take a call on what we think would transform the country significantly and take the tough decisions in some cases to ensure that we are creating jobs. But we must also remember that a lot of businesses are SMEs in Kenya, and we must support those businesses to be able to grow.
Absolutely. And let me bring in Sam. When it comes to, local traders, we knew that there was the challenge of mitumba and the ban, of course, thanks to the pandemic. That has since been lifted. But when you look at the mitumba market as a whole, it's huge in terms of how labor intensive it is. 20 million Kenyans, either formally or informally or directly or indirectly employed within that sector. So when you're talking about trying to cross over many of them from being local traders to maybe manufacturers and producers, what does that mean in terms of jobs and people who rely on mitumba and the second-hand clothing market, for instance?
Victoria, we have been having issues with the government in terms of their priority and implementation of policy. You have said it rightfully that 20 million are affected directly or indirectly. And the other question that we were asking is, where do they get the cotton? Because as Kazuri is saying, we should start from, from the farmer who is farming cotton to the people who are actually now, buying that cotton and, the manufacturers who are buying that cotton from the farmers. When you look at the farming of cotton, it has been killed. There's no incentive to make sure that the farmers are able to produce enough cotton to be able to feed the appetite of the market. And so it beats the sense why, in terms of the government saying that they are banning mitumba and they are trying to push, the apparel industry into manufacturing. The other question, it begs the question that do they have, the local manufacturers, especially for the apparel, do they have enough capacity to feed the economy in terms of the appetite of the clothing industry in the country? And you find that many times we are very unrealistic with where many of our citizenry are. Many people cannot afford to buy those kind of clothes which are being made locally. And so we must be able to migrate from one level to another, and the policies must be very clear. But many times we find that the government forcefully induce change in a sector, and what happens, there are more losses than, and bad things happen to the businesses, and actually businesses close down. And so it must involve the stakeholders, and it has to have the modus operandi, the mode of operation of how the implementation of those policies must be made in rightful articulation so that we can be able to, to expand that growth. But basically, when you look at the mitumba, and that's why it had to backfire and they had to lift the ban. But initially, when you talk with the government officials, some of them, they are telling you behind the back, no, we have to push, we have to induce pain, you have to make sure that these people are able to become local manufacturers, but you do not do that. You progressively make sure that these people can be able to migrate from who they are, to who you want them to be.
Reginald, when we look at, and we talk about industrializing Africa, making Kenya a manufacturing hub, not just for the region, but for the continent, questions arise as to, well, which is a place that we can look to in terms of an example? And many would say East Asia, right, in terms of how they were able to grow their model of manufacturing and kind of boost their economies as a result of the industry. Will we follow that same trajectory, or will it be slightly different for the continent and for Kenya?
It has to be different because our comparative strengths are different with the with the Asian countries altogether. And they ran on their strength, which was now technology. So if Kenya and Africa is going to industrialize, you look at what your strength is. The amount of resources that we are investing in agriculture, they're very minute.
All right, so we need to link back up with Reginald. We appear to be losing him intermittently, but we'll link back up. But Phyllis, I want to go back to something that you mentioned in terms of Kenya really tapping into the African market. And this, of course, ties in with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and what that means for intra-African trade and the opportunities that it opens up for the manufacturing sector. If you can speak more to that and the opportunities that exist there.
Thank you very much. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area gives us an opportunity to trade together as Africa. And the opportunity in Africa is the huge market that exists within the continent. We also have a youthful population, so we have a labor force that would be able then to be employed within the manufacturing sector. The consumption of various products within the continent is also quite high and growing. And this provides an opportunity for us to be able to produce a lot of products within the African continent. There's also a lot of opportunity for value chain linkages within the different countries in Africa. We are also very rich in resources as a continent, so that presents an opportunity for a lot of value addition in products within the continent. Of course, some of the challenges include the infrastructure, the ability to quickly move products within the continent. So the investment in infrastructure, interconnectivity within Africa is going to be very critical. Our financial and trading platforms and how we are able to quickly trade using financial systems, I think, is also going to be equally important as we move into taking advantage of the opportunities within the AfCFTA. So all in all, I think as a country, that's the positioning to see how we can do a lot more locally so that when we export within the AfCFTA, we are taking full advantage and exporting value-added products within the continent.
And what about just some of the competition that we see from other trading blocs, like, for instance, COMESA, and you find quite a few traders choosing to import from a trading bloc like COMESA as opposed to sourcing from within because of the cost disadvantages. How can we respond to that from a local perspective?
You're right, Victoria, that one of the challenges in terms of growing our exports is really around our cost competitiveness. We can only be able to do it on the background of having affordable cost of doing business within the country. And as an association, I think you hear us speak a lot about competitiveness and the need to fix the same. We have established or basically benchmarked with countries regionally and globally, where we also do business, and established that we have about a 12% cost disadvantage as a country, meaning that we need to reduce our cost of importation, our cost of manufacture at factory level, and our cost of supply chain and distribution of goods as we get them out of our factories. So the ability to do that will make us more competitive within the region. And even as we move into issues like the second-hand transformation that has been spoken about by my fellow panelists, it would require us to be cost competitive, because in order to produce locally some of these products, if you're not cost competitive, it also is a disadvantage to the citizenry. So the issues of competitiveness need to be addressed, the issues of ease of doing business, so that as much as we are encouraging everyone to produce locally, we're able to produce at the lowest cost, both for our domestic and international export markets.
All right. On that note, let's take a short break here on Daybreak. My guests still with me, Phyllis Wakiaga, Samuel Karanja, and Reginald Kadzutu, who will be joining us to continue the discussion on manufacturing and boosting the sector for the benefit of the economy and, most importantly, the citizenry in terms of jobs. We'll be back. Stay with us.